Yes.
Did you see when he was talking to it was some people, some white people there, and they were TV people, and I guess they were asking him how come we can't say the N word, and DeRoy Lindo, he looked at him and he said, you can say it, go ahead, just say it. Here, he said, just go ahead, and he would, and then he said, well, I'll say it with you, but they wouldn't say it. But DeRoy Lindo, I really like him.
Would you please state your name, date of birth?
Oliver Harris, February 12th, 1956.
And what city?
Elyria, Ohio.
So, in your father's name and your mother's?
Father was Oliver Harris. My mother was Vivian Harris.
Vivian Harris. And where were they from?
Dad was from Troy, Alabama, and my mom was from Elyria.
And did your father even speak about living from Alabama, living down in Alabama?
Not a lot. We never really talked a lot about that. We did go down to Alabama periodically.
And what do you know what brought your father up from Alabama?
I believe he was trying to find a better life situation, and he enlisted into the military, the U.S. Army, and from there he was discharged. I think he did his time. Until 1946, and from there he went to New Jersey with his brother, and from there he somehow migrated to Elyria, Ohio. I don't actually know how he got that far west, but that's where he ended up.
Mm-hmm. And what in the neighborhood of Elyria, where did you grow up at?
Grew up on the south side of Elyria, 16th Street, between Middle and West, and 16th Street was it was a pretty popular street back in the 70s, late 60s.
Who was some of your neighbors that you can recall, and what made the neighborhood and what made it popular? What made 16th Street popular?
16th Street was popular. We had different families. We had the Newton family, the Hunter family, Paris, Fitzpatrick, Woods, Jones. The Joneses, can't forget the Joneses, and then we had the Maxwells. Looking back, I think most of the people owned their homes on 16th Street. I'm trying to think. I know one family rented from a lady that lived next door to us, Miss Burl Saxon. But I think for the most part, they owned their houses.
With ownership, what jobs did your parents do?
My mother was a housewife. My father was a postal worker. I believe he was the first black letter carrier at the U.S. Postal Service in Elyria. And he was also a professional photographer. And for a period of time, he worked at the J.C. Penney photo department when they built the mall. He was one of the first people to work in the photo department, the camera department. I went on a couple of, we always had cameras around the house and always had pictures, and I got into it myself, and I started actually taking pictures when Polaroids came out. I had a really nice Polaroid camera, and I used to go up to Gigi's barbershop, and I would take pictures at the barbershop. And I did pretty good up there.
Where'd you take pictures of? People getting their hair done, or just
the gentlemen getting their haircuts? I think I charged $1 for color and 75 for black and white.
Okay.
So they would get their hair done, and they were pretty proud. It had Gigi, the female barber, Geneva Jones. She had the barbershop there for years, and she was good. She was really popular and good for the neighborhood, and that was located on West Avenue and 15th Street, right next to, it was in the same complex where Herb's Laundromat was in.
So, going back to the migration part, Did your father ever take you down to Alabama?
We did go to Alabama on a couple occasions, and it was real interesting for me. I was a child, I was really young when I first went down there, and it was interesting, but it was kind of fun for me because my grandmother had pigs and stuff, pigs and chickens. Uh, it was pretty much in the city, Boyd Street in Alabama, in Troy, Alabama. But she had pigs across the street, and I used to really like to feed the pigs. We stayed with her, and we were just visiting her for perhaps a week at a time, and that was really all my mother could stand because she wasn't having Alabama at all. She didn't. I think she only went one time, and she said she would never go back again, and she didn't.
What did she like? The heat? Or just...
I don't think she liked her mother-in-law for one thing, but I think my grandmother was a little pushy, and other than that, they got along. They talked on the phone and things like that. But any other time that I went to Alabama, it was either with my dad, and sometimes my sister would go also.
While in Alabama, did you meet any other family members down there, or just pretty much stay with your grandmother?
I had an uncle that lived with my grandmother, and he had children down there. And we had some relatives in Montgomery, Alabama, that we would go up and stay with them too. So my grandmother's brother was there, so we would have to kind of split our time in Montgomery. And Montgomery was a little bit more progressive than Troy. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like a city, so. But I had good experiences down there. It's probably more than 40 years ago. I would like to go back, and I'd like to take my wife, but I'd like to go back one time. For a period of time, a couple of my cousins, they were talking about migrating. They were wanting, suggesting that we all move back to Troy, Alabama, because we had some property down there. But I can't, I couldn't live down there. I couldn't live south of the Mason-Dixon line at all.
You growing up here in Elyria and just being used to the Elyria way, right?
Just knowing a little bit about the history of the South. I'm a Northerner. I'm no better than anybody else, but I'm just a Northerner, and I think there's still some restrictions down there. I think you still have to pretty much stay in your place. You have to watch your steps. So you get hotshot people from the north like me go down there. We might, make some bad moves. You have to be careful down there. I have a couple cousins down there that are really, they're more, I'd say, passive than I would be in some of the experiences that they've had. So I don't think I would want to move back down or move down there, period.
Mm-hmm. But your family does still own the property down there?
The particular property, no. Okay. The answer is no.
How much land was it? If you can recall.
I'm not quite sure. I guess it was a couple acres on one side of the street, maybe 1 acre on the other side of the street, and I think there might have been some more, but I can't remember exactly. But I know for a period of time, I was paying the land taxes on the parcels down there, and we just, I don't know, it just went by the wayside. Friday night when I was growing up, this was back in the 60s. That's when I kind of discovered pizza, and we had Angelina's Pizza on Cleveland Street. That was the first pizza parlor that I ever knew about. So we would probably get a cheese pizza. Didn't know anything about pepperoni back then. So we would get a cheese pizza and sit up and watch television. Families used to sit down and watch television together, watch some family shows. And my dad he was usually listening to the Indians on the radio, because that's when they were on a radio. So a lot of times he would sit on the porch, he'd take the radio out, and we would listen to the Indians play. But it was pretty quiet Friday nights, pretty quiet neighborhood back then.
And as far as sports on the South Side, who would you say, who was one of the athletes that stood out to you during the time you were growing up?
Professional or
no, just in the neighborhood?
In the neighborhood, that's kind of a hard one. Other than
name a couple.
I mean, when I got to high school, junior high, I mean, we had football players, Philip Oliver, we had Ike Maxwell, Freddie Jones. A lot of those guys were good. Okay, we had Little League South, and you had minor league and you had major league, and I played Little League South. I wasn't any good, but I played. Going to elementary school, we had small fry basketball on Saturday mornings, and I naturally wasn't good at that either, but I played.
What elementary school?
Hamilton. They had a small fry basketball, and they would have the games on Saturday mornings. And I think I was on a team called the Cardinals. And the old gymnasium that they tore down, that's where the games used to take place. So that was pretty interesting. Basketball. I played 7th grade football for Franklin Junior High. Naturally, I wasn't any good. So I was better at baseball than I was anything. And I was really better defensively than hitting. Yeah. Graduated in 1974. Ancient.
So as far as the neighborhood itself, can you name any stores that you all frequent?
Right.
On the south side of Elyria.
In our neighborhood, on the corner of 16th and Middle, we had a gas station. It was a Texaco gas station, and that was there for years, and that was next to the Polish Club. You had Kaminsky's Barbershop was at the corner of 16th and Middle. At the other end of the street, West Avenue, you had Mitchell's Barbecue. You had White Horse Drive-In, which was called the Custard Stand. A guy named Bucky used to run that. Then on 15th and West Avenue, you had Frank's Market. That was a real good market in the neighborhood. It was a plus having them in the neighborhood, because they had good meats, and he actually extended credit to the people in the neighborhood. He had a pretty good rapport with the people in the neighborhood. So that was a good thing. And then on the other end of 15th and Middle, you had Dombrowski's grocery store. There was a hardware store where the old neighborhood center was. There's a hardware store right there at 17th and Oberlin Road. I think that was Abercars. Girl I was in kindergarten with, Marcy Abercar, her dad owned it.
So these people that own these stores, were they living in the neighborhood as well, for the most part?
Right.
So they were invested in the neighborhood, not only with their stores, but they also had homes in the same neighborhood.
Right. They lived in the neighborhood, and they were pretty much minorities because we had Hungarians, Italians, um,
Polish.
Polish in the neighborhood. So the Kaminskis, I think the Kaminskis actually, some of them lived at the barbershop, lived at the barbershop there because it was a house connected to the barbershop, and then some of them lived on, I think, 10th Street. Okay, and the Abercars, I believe they lived off of Middle Avenue, and let me see, you had the Abercars, Kaminskis, Dombrowskis. The Dombrowskis were on 15th and Middle, and I don't know exactly where they lived. There was a Clark gas station at Oberlin Road and West Avenue right there. That was a pretty convenient thing. So we had quite a few stores. When we used to go to school to Hamilton, we would stop in Dombrowski's and get candy. Then when we started going to Franklin, we would go to Miss McDonald. This is a lady that had a store right there on West Avenue, pretty much West Avenue and 12th Street. And we used to go in there and get our candy before we went to school. So that was really, these people really meant something in our lives. Really, they probably didn't know. Like Miss McDonald, someone said that she was about 4 foot tall, and that's all she was. But they were kind of staples in the community, and we remember, you remember people like that when you grow up. You remember some of the people because, you'd get candy, and maybe sometimes she would give you an extra piece or something like that, and it was interesting how those people kind of, it was like a melting pot neighborhood. And you had the laundromat. You had Herb's Laundromat. It was owned by a guy, an immigrant from Germany, and he was great because we had somewhere to wash our clothes. Okay, we had somewhere to wash our clothes. He maintained it pretty good, so our needs were pretty much met back then. As far as our groceries, I was going up all the time for cigarettes for my mom and dad, and all that. They had those types of things, and then you had the hardware store. So we had just about everything we needed in that neighborhood. And this is before the Midway Mall, and this is before some of these stores. But it was overall, it was a good experience. You had probably at least 15 churches in that radius, which there's still approximately that many there. There's some of the small churches, but there's churches all around there. I went to Asbury United Methodist Church. Me and my dad went there, and my mom went to Second Baptist Church. I guess what they call Chapman Lane, I think. Yeah, that was named after Isaac Chapman,
Who's Isaac Chapman?
who was one of our councilmen
For the South Side.
the Fifth Ward. He's possibly, I think he might have been the first black councilman. I think he may have. We had Isaac Chapman, we had Oliver Jones, we had Marcus Madison, Harmon Larkins, and then we had Thomas Shores.
So throughout the years that you have seen what changed over on the South Side? What changes?
Most of the people moved away. I moved away. You have two people that still live on 16th Street that lived there when I was a kid. I don't know. Neighborhood's looking a little bit more blighted. Some of the properties are rentals. You have absentee owners, absentee landlords, and I think that's one of the issues. But I think there's individuals that are trying to turn that around right now. But the neighborhood's, it's more blighted. I'm not really sure exactly how much crime is perpetrated there now, but um, I still go to the South Side. I mean that's my stomping ground, so I still go, and I'll go and pull up on 16th, and I'll hang out on the corner for 20 minutes talking to the guys there. I mean, I you know because that's where I'm from, and there's nothing special about me. I'll hang out a little bit.
And we're talking about the South Side. Do you feel? Let's talk about the racism, and if you experience any, could you explain anything about that?
I never really experienced racism when I was a child. If I did, I didn't know it. I didn't. It was like a melting pot, and I'm sure people had their pet peeves. They had different things that they liked and disliked. But as far as racism, blatant racism, I don't recall seeing it when I was a child. Can't speak for how adults felt, but nobody really. I never seen any incidents of adults, fighting each other or calling each other names. Uh, so I mean, I really think that was a good neighborhood. I really appreciated growing up in that neighborhood because I mean, the older people, they were great. They would watch out for us, and we had to really be on our best behavior most of the time because we knew what was waiting for us at home in case we weren't. Because I mean, they had telephones, so um, we just had to.
The news be waiting on you when you get home.
Right. Because if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, then somebody's gonna drop a dime on you and make a call. You know, acting a fool. We had the Bauer Dairy. The dairy was there too, and we weren't supposed to be playing in the Bauer Dairy, but naturally we always did. We rode our bicycles in the dairy, and but it was not really a lot of racism. I think you experience that when you perhaps get older, get up in high school or something like that, especially high school, because you've got people coming from all over the city going to the high school. Okay, we were just the people in our area, in our little community. But when you go to high school, you have people coming because there was only one high school. You had Elyria Catholic, but as far as a public high school, you only had one. So you had people coming from all areas, north, south, east, and west. So some people were bringing their baggage from the east side or from the north side, and there might be a conflict, something like that, But I really never had a problem with individuals because I kind of kept myself under control because I'm only 4 foot tall, so I didn't want to get beat down. So I usually kept my mouth shut.
So what kind of racism have you seen out in our city of Elyria or experienced?
The only racism that I really experienced was during the riots, and the riots were as a result of the police department shooting an individual and killing him, a young black man, and killing him. So after that happened, I was working, and I was coming home from work one night.
You were working for who and where?
I was working for a manufacturing company on the east side of Elyria, and I think I was doing like a 3 to 11. And as I was going home one night, I was backing into my driveway. I had a couple guys pulled up next to me, and they threw a boulder in my car window. And the window was rolled down, so therefore the glass didn't break, but it went right past my face, and it didn't hit me, but it was still an attack. So I backed in my driveway, and I was gonna go in the house and get something to retaliate, but my mom stopped me, and she was pretty upset, and she was yelling and screaming. So I stayed home. I didn't do anything. But that's about all that I experienced.
But you knew where it was coming from, as far as, and that's where you felt that was a racial attack.
I feel it was a racial attack because I saw the individuals that 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 the suspects. I saw them, and at that time, the State Highway Patrol, they had they had like a base over on Prospect Street over at the rec center. That's where they were headquartered, because you had perhaps, I don't know, 10, 15 state troopers that were patrolling the city with the police. So they were trying to keep everything quelled down, from really escalating. But the whole thing did make national news. It was on national news. But the young man was shot in the back, and he was killed. And I knew him. He was some of my best friend's first cousin. So I knew who he was. And I just really wasn't feeling shooting somebody in the back. I wasn't feeling that because, and it's still happening now, but if a person's back is turned to you, they're running away or something like that. They're not a threat to you. They're not a threat if they're moving away from you. So I couldn't see. The policeman, he just couldn't run fast enough to catch him, so he shot him.
So what was the other? What was the?
Do you feel that the satellite office for the State Highway Patrol in the East Side, was that keeping the blacks away from that area, or were they actually protecting what was going on that side of town, the black side of town?
They were at Eastern Heights. They were there because I think they were sleeping in there. I think they had bunks in there, but then they would get in their cars and they would patrol the whole city, especially the South Side, because I don't really know of any black people that were going to the North Side raising hell, or the East Side really raising hell. I don't really know, but at that time, they were really riding, 2 and 3 deep over there on the South Side. There was some looting going on. Frank's Market, I mentioned earlier, they were looting Frank's Market. They were tearing that meat department up. They was selling meat the next day. So two wrongs don't make a right. Was it right? No. Was it right for a person to be coming out of making a robbery or something, or breaking in? No, that's not right. But as I said, they were looting different businesses like Frank's, and I think they probably busted some windows. They might have busted Miss McDonald's window out, and probably Dombrowski's there on Middle Avenue. But it was a bad, it was a black eye for Elyria at that time.
To piggyback off that question, and maybe the reasoning why they were patrolling heavy over there is to contain it.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And
yeah.
So meaning like they kind of controlled it, like, all right, y'all can tear up anything you want over here. Because they really weren't preventing stuff. If you're saying these places were getting hit, they were just kind of containing it. But you better not venture outside of those parameters on the South Side. Because there was no killings following after that shooting, correct?
Right.
So it was just it was more like a control mission at that point to keep everything centralized or isolated on the south end of town. and that was probably strategic
Mm-hmm.
as far as making it spread. So
And the Elyria police, they were still around too, and um, I still say I saw one of them with a machine gun one night, and
an officer.
Elyria police. I seen him down there at West Avenue and Broad Street, and I don't I don't know. I don't know if it was fully automatic, but it sure looked like it. But he didn't get a chance to use it. But that was just a bad time. That was a bad time in Elyria's history.